Hi there, and welcome to Ask a South Bay Doctor, presented to you by South Bay Mommies and Daddies. My name is Laura Nickerson. Thank you so much for joining us. Today, we're talking all about COVID-19, facts, figures, and how we can keep our families safe. We'll get into that in just a minute, but first, I wanted to give you an update on a special project from South Bay Mommies and Daddies. The project is called South Bay Heroes. Now, this was launched in 2020, late December, and this fundraising project so far has raised almost $15,000. What does the money go towards? Well, it goes towards food for our frontline healthcare workers in 6 different hospitals that we're delivering to around the South Bay area. So far, we have fundraised and delivered over 960 meals. As you know, we can always go further with this. So the question is, how can you support this campaign? Well, there's a couple ways. First of all, you can make a donation. You can put a thank you sign in your window. You can take our pledge to be safe and to be kind to others. And you can nominate a local restaurant. You can get all the details about this and so much more at southbaymommiesandaddies.com. Now, we're talking all about COVID-19 tonight, and so we had to bring in some professionals to give us some great advice. I'd like to introduce one of our guests, Dr. Jessica Kiss from Palos Verdes Medical Group. Dr. Kiss, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
We're looking forward to it. I'd also like to introduce Lindsey Burrell, who's a critical care nurse from Little Company of Mary. Hi there.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm so grateful to have you both here. Let's get right into this. I want to start off by just talking about the state we're in, especially the state of California, as far as our COVID-19 numbers. So let's take a look at where we're at right now. First of all, California has over 3.2 million cases right now. Total deaths, some in over 41,000 people. Tests reported over 42 million, almost 43 million right now. And so far, the only amount of vaccines administered is 3,649,000. So that's the state of California, which we all know is pretty big. But in Los Angeles County, where we are, here are the daily updates. We've had 3,763 new cases today, over 1.1 million that's to date, 205 new deaths, over 17,000 to date. And currently, we have 5,259 people hospitalized. So let's discuss those facts. Let's talk about how we can keep our families safe and what you can do if you or your loved ones need medical attention. So I just threw out a bunch of numbers, and that's a lot of math involved in that. But really, what do those numbers mean to us? Dr. Kiss, where are we?
So we're kind of in an interesting place right this second. We are on what appears to be at the moment a downswing from the previous height we experienced a couple weeks back, likely associated with a spike in numbers due to holidays. And combine that with the fact that we think that there's a variation in California that was a little bit more contagious, kind of we had a perfect storm. Really where I look to the numbers is not just the raw data, because that can be a little confusing. Where I look is to see the percent positive. So what does that tell us? That tells us the percent of people who test who have a positive result. Why is that important? Because it's telling us the percent rate of cases that are increasing or decreasing. Right now, that number is around 11%. A couple weeks ago, that number was 20%. So it's taken an exponential decline, which is really great. And that goes along with what we're seeing with hospital numbers. You look at the South Bay hospitalization as of today, we're looking at approximately 400 cases across the South Bay that are requiring hospitalization. Just a few weeks back, we were over 1,000. So it's really improving. And that's a great sign.
That is a great sign. And it's an interesting point that you made that we're under the blanket of LA County, but really, how are these numbers reflected in the South Bay?
So it's pretty much well reflected at this point. I would say in our office, where we are a COVID testing facility, we are seeing commensurate numbers. Our numbers are also on the decline, but we are seeing patients who are still really sick. I think the difference right now is, though total numbers are declining, patients who are sick are pretty much the same proportion, meaning that if you contract it and you are in a risk category, you still have the same probability of severe illness. And that's concerning.
Yeah, all of this is concerning. And especially when you're in the actual ICU and you're seeing these people come and go. Nurse Burrell, what is that experience like right now? And how does that compare to what it might have been even a couple of weeks ago?
You know what? I am proud to say that just in the last week, things are looking much better. I'm always cautious to say that because I say that and then, we're hit really hard. But, weeks ago, we were more than full. So we're a 28-bed ICU at Providence and Torrance, and we were housing 39 patients. Now, remember, that's COVID and non-COVID. But when you push staff to that level, it's difficult. It's very difficult. And now we are down to, I want to say we're 21 COVID patients, and then we have a handful of just non-COVID patients that are still requiring, acute support. But we can feel the difference between weeks ago and today. I mean, there's just a lighter feeling in the unit. That's not to say that these patients aren't as sick as they were before. They are absolutely sick. They're critically ill. The sad part of this is that we have gotten more beds in the ICU primarily because a lot of them have passed. So that's a little bit hard. So, I mean, I take the positive that, yes, we are on the decline, which feels really good. But I'm hesitant to say that because I do want to honor the people that have passed. That's difficult.
Sure. And I can only imagine what the feeling is in these hospitals and with frontline workers like you. I mean, how on earth do you get up every day and jump into that? What are some of the things that keep you going when the day gets a little rough?
I've always said from day one that I have a passion for this, and I do it for my patients and their families. And that's my driving force, really, every day, is that I feel confident in walking into every room in the intensive care and believing that I can provide something to a patient that will hopefully make a difference in their lives and the families' lives that I have the honor to treat. And that's what keeps me going. It's very defeating. This entire process has been very defeating. Seeing this amount of death in this such inhumane ways that these patients are dying has been very difficult. But I just have to remind myself every day I go to work, these patients need me, and I'm here for it.
And I know we're all grateful for that. Dr. Kiss, I had a question for you about some of the downtrends that we've seen. Is that necessarily fully reflective of basic numbers, or is this because perhaps there's less testing or people maybe aren't taking it as seriously because they think it's getting better? I mean, how accurate are those numbers, and what can potentially change those in the next few weeks that might surprise somebody?
Yeah, I think there's a couple different factors in play here. I think that truly the numbers are decreasing for the most part. And people who had known exposure have either gotten sick or didn't get sick and kind of move forward from it. And I think in the process too, everyone who we count on, all of you, have really stepped up and taken the personal responsibility and continued to double down with social distancing and increase mask use and stay at home when we needed you to. So I think that has really combined to really help drive the numbers down. So I do think that they're genuinely down for that reason. But I think potentially this is when we all tend to let our guard down, right? Super Bowl's around the corner this weekend. Valentine's Day is coming up. We need you to continue to just be patient with us a little bit longer as the vaccination slowly rolls out to hopefully provide some secondary immunity and protection to the community. And so I think if people can just slowly get back into things and continue to be good with mask use and stay home as much as possible, we won't have those surprises in a few weeks.
That is such a great conversation to have right now. I feel like when people see numbers start to go down, they go, oh, great. I guess I didn't need to do that anymore. Mask, schmask. So where are we right now? We have reopened a lot of things from the stay-at-home orders that were over the holidays. Should we be double masking, for example? I know that's been a big hot topic. What do you think about that, Dr. Kiss?
I mean, if you come in my office, you're going to see me double masked. And the reason I'm double masked is I'm trying to protect my stronger mask from getting soiled to use it a little bit longer. But outside in the world, I do not do that. Some people may benefit from it. People who are higher risk, who have to venture out for whatever reason, there are studies that a double cloth mask can help because they overlay each other. If you're wearing a KN95 or you're wearing a surgical mask, you probably don't need to double mask. The best thing you can do, and I've talked about this, I think before, is do a puff test. If you can feel your breath on your hand through your mask is probably not strong enough to prevent illness at that point. And in a mask like that, you might want to either double mask if it's cute and wear your surgical underneath. I've totally been known to do that. Or, chuck that one for something a little bit better.
Now, what about the outdoor dining? I know that they just reopened that. Nurse Burrell, have you seen a lot of people come in potentially who've been exposed by being at outdoor dining? Would you have the information to know that at the time?
I get that question a lot, actually. It's like, how many people do you really see come into the hospital who said that you've dined outside and then you suddenly have COVID? And the answer is we don't know. Personally, as a nurse in the ICU, generally speaking, the population that we see when I do get a chance to talk to them before they're intubated, and intubated means a breathing tube placed, so you're not talking, is that they've had large family gatherings. That's usually what we say. Now, is that to say that, after a large family gathering in which a person's been infected, that they then went out and ventured out to a restaurant, they had no idea they were positive? I mean, absolutely. We don't know, and I always say to people, just be smart about what you're doing. Just because we're not getting those exact numbers of positive cases that come just from a restaurant doesn't mean they aren't happening. It's just that usually people can recall, yes, I had a large family gathering, or yes, I gathered with my friends with no masks inside because it was cold. It's something to keep in mind.
I really want you to say that like 50 times over and over again, because I've heard that before from other people in the medical field, the same thing. Most of the time it's from large family gatherings inside with no masks. And it can be so awkward to have that kind of conversation with your family, your elderly mother, your, whatever it may be, your in-laws who don't believe in it or whatever it might be. So I really think that bears repeating and repeating. And I also know a lot of people who go out there and they're, really protective and they're wearing K95, out in the middle of the desert with no one around them, and they're super worried about it. But really, how do we find the happy medium there? How do we find what's safe for us? Dr. Kiss?
Having a conversation with a healthcare professional that you trust is really important here to kind of strategize and move forward and try to figure out where your risk is personally and to come up with a better plan for yourself and your family. But also, use your judgment. The CDC has a wonderful patient information. If you just type in CDC COVID, you're going to get information for the general public to help you really piece through the data and figure out what's right for all of you.
That's great advice. That's great advice. Now, how do we look into the sports, the outdoor activities, the things that are reopening for our kids, especially our kids who've been cooped up all, for however long? Are they safe? Do we know? Nurse Burrell, do you have any ideas on that?
It's difficult, I think, for me to answer. Dr. Kiss, this might be a question for you. Because again, when it comes down to the kids, I mean, I don't see a pediatric population. I'm working in the intensive care with, generally middle to elder. But I will say that, with regards to kids being sick, I haven't personally heard of a ton of an increase in cases, which leads me to believe that maybe they're not getting as sick. I'm not quite sure. But what I am concerned with are the kids and maybe the middle-aged people who are coming home and infecting the people that are the most at risk. So you're talking about the elderly or people with like extreme comorbidities. Those are really what I'm worried about. So when we talk about kids going back to school or going out and socializing again, I want parents to really be wary of, who really is at risk in the family that they could expose to. That's kind of my piece on that.
Dr. Kiss, what do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think as far as kids returning to sports, first of all, mental health is really important at this point. We are seeing a huge increase of mental health needs in children and adults across the board too, but in particular with kids that we wouldn't have seen in the past. Safe socialization is really important and physical activity. And we know from data that outdoor physical activity, especially when you add a mask onto it, is fairly safe and low risk of transmission. And I think, you really have to take into account the risk for the whole family. But I know I'm sending my own children back, and we've been very risk adverse due to family risk. And I feel it's very important for mental health and that it's relatively a safe. Nothing's 100% right now, but as far as risk goes, it's a lower risk activity, particularly if we're talking about outdoor sport.
That's good. You just have to make sure that one parent doesn't start screaming. You know how they scream during the soccer games, right in your face. If they're going to scream, they need to wear a mask, right? So do we know of any long-term effects so far? I mean, it's so new. It's hard to tell what's going on with that. But do we know what might happen in the next year or two to people who've had a severe case of COVID? Nurse Burrell, do you know?
Dr. Kiss, I'm sure you're seeing this, but we see and hear of patients that are having this like brain fog, severe fatigue that is lasting for now like 6 to 8 to 9 months. People who are otherwise very healthy and active are having shortness of breath on like minimal exertion, which is, I mean, let's just say, compare that to the flu. It's like, when would you ever hear about that? But now with COVID, it's like these people are aging, 20 years and not wanting to at all. But here they are, having gone through COVID and had symptoms for 2 to 3 weeks. And then we end up with, potentially years of side effects. So it's quite interesting. I mean, sad, but very interesting.
Is that relevant at all to how severe their case was or how long they were hospitalized?
No, actually, I've seen people who were symptomatic for just days and, minimal fevers and not hospitalized, having symptoms to this day, and they got it back in, May. Whereas I've seen patients who were hospitalized in the intensive care that are doing relatively okay. Sometimes just the same symptoms as somebody who's had it for just a few days and very minimal side effects. So, I mean, there's no consistency that I'm seeing yet.
I think that's what makes it so scary, is there is no real guidebook to this. Dr. Kiss, do you see a lot of that same thing, the brain fog and any other lingering effects from COVID?
Very much so. And today I had a patient come in who has some strange things, and the only link is she's had these strange things since COVID last March. There are some startling studies about these things. There is a study about college athletes who had COVID that show a good percentage have cardiac damage. It's non-specific. We don't know if it's reversible, but it's there. And these are young, healthy kids who had mostly minimal symptoms at the time of infection. So it's too early to know what the long-term ramifications will be. But at this point, I'd say the most common long-haul symptoms, as these people have coined them now, is ongoing fatigue, brain fog, neurologic type symptoms, and the lack of taste and smell. Some people that's lasted. I have a couple patients who April had COVID, still can't fully taste or smell. And we really still don't understand why. No other illness really does that.
That's wild. Do you see a lot of kids in the area coming in who have cases of COVID? And of any of those kids, have you seen any more severe cases that have really affected them? Dr. Giss?
Yes, we've seen quite a few children with COVID, quite a few in the last couple weeks, declining with the overall rate declining. And we've seen quite a few severely ill kids, particularly kids with underlying illness, with asthma and other illnesses associated. We've had several be hospitalized with complications. All have ultimately done well, but again, we don't know the long-term consequences.
Right, right. Well, let's talk about the vaccine a little bit. This is the one little shining piece of hope after a very long year. At this point, LA County is allowing 65 and older, from what I understand, to get the COVID vaccine. However, not everybody's been able to get an appointment and to actually get that. So what's that look like in the South Bay right now? Nurse Burrell, what about you?
So I'm hearing the same challenges with a lot of people that I know, specifically my area. Just today, I was actually reading across different like social media platforms of people saying that they've been on to websites numerous times and not able to get an appointment, or that the site is down. I'm hearing a lot about it. I know that, I've heard from Kaiser Permanente that they are offering, it actually seems pretty easy to call. You make an appointment within the next couple of weeks. So, I mean, look, that's the glimmer of hope. I do realize that this is going to be some time that we get a lot of people vaccinated, but it's happening. It's happening slowly. And if that's the only glimmer of hope that we have right now, I will absolutely take it. But I have to preface, and I'm sure we'll talk about this in a second, that I just don't want people putting their guards down at this point, that it's, okay, we can go back to normal life, and we can't right now. But
let's keep going with that, actually, because that is a really important subject. You have some people getting their first shot, some people getting their second shot, everybody wanting so badly to get back to normal life. Break this down for me. How do things change for you personally after getting the first shot, the second shot, after the 3 weeks? Does anything change for you at that point, or how should you be proceeding? Nurse Burrell, you can start with that.
Do you want me to go first? Okay. I felt great after the first, because I felt like, okay, this is the first step to feeling a little bit more protected, primarily when I'm going to work. PPE is phenomenal, but like normal human beings, we let our guard down for even 1 second, and that 1 second could be the exposure that could lead us into a hospital with COVID. Number 2 was a little rough, but absolutely worth the side effects of it. And I know I've seen the gamut of them, from Moderna to Pfizer, symptoms ranging from nothing at all to just arm pain, and then others having full-blown nausea, vomiting, fever. But to me, life has not changed dramatically from the vaccine, and I'm 3 weeks out from the second vaccine, or the booster. I don't want to let my guard down. I know even with like Super Bowl coming up, I still believe that there's that possibility. And it's not about me. It's really about the people that I treat. And God forbid, I would never want to be a carrier of COVID and spread it to a patient who was a non-COVID and who wouldn't do well. And that's what I continually just preach to the public, is that, I might be in good health and young, and everyone else around me will be as well. But, it's about everyone else who doesn't have the immunity to fight this. And I do it for every single patient that I see that passes in front of me. And I plead with the public and everyone watching, is that I just want you to think about those people who have not been lucky enough to fight this. And so the vaccine is absolutely amazing. It is, in my eyes, a miracle that we're even here right now so quickly. And I'm thankful for it. But until this really rolls out and we have a mass population being vaccinated, let's just do it for everybody else.
So Dr. Kiss, would you say then same thing, that once you have the vaccine, nothing should change? You should still mask and do all the things that you were doing. And then at what point would that potentially change?
Yeah, absolutely. I will tell you, people keep asking me, how do you feel after getting your second? Don't you feel protected? And I keep saying the only difference is I feel my Jewish mom guilt, right? And it's because, I have to wait for everybody else to have a turn. And I go into work every day. I put on my scrubs and my same PPE every day and act as if I am able to be exposed the same way as before the vaccination. Because vaccination's an insurance policy, right? It's not something we want to use as primary means right now. When will that change? Probably will not change until we start getting kids really vaccinated, because though kids don't tend to get as ill, and so far data doesn't show that they're really vectors of spread, the reality is we haven't sent them back to school yet at that point, right? So we don't fully know. I am a firm believer that kids do need to go back, and that as the numbers dictate, it's safe to go back, but at the same time, they won't be vaccinated yet, and we know that. And it's okay, but we all need to keep acting accordingly, even if we've all been vaccinated at that point. So really, I think we're looking at, once kids start getting vaccinated, to really consider that the vaccine is going to be really helpful for herd immunity at that point.
Yeah, and especially being a parent, as I know we all are, you know that kids in school, if there's a germ within 50 miles, they will spread it in 30 seconds of getting back to class. It's just how they roll, you know? So I agree. I think it's really important that we look at kids as a part of this, even if they may not be affected in the same way in general. But what is the progress of the vaccine for kids? At this point, they're saying what, 16 and older, right? At what point might they have a vaccine for kids? Dr. Kiss?
So, yes, we're looking right now. There's a lot of clinical trials running between Pfizer and Moderna have just started with enrolling 12 to 18-year-olds and 12 to 17-year-olds rather. And in that, they have to make sure there's safety data. So it's looking like probably the beginning of summer, they'll have reduced that from 6 to 12-year-olds in studies. And hopefully simultaneously then the vaccination will be released to the public for 12 to 17-year-olds. So it's going to be kind of a staged rollout. And after 6 to 12, we'll go under 6. And then probably that cutoff will be 2, as in previous vaccinations, and then under 2. So we're still looking, as far as research goes, for it to be fully vetted for children, not until probably the fall at this rate.
Gotcha. Are we worried about how they might react, that they may have stronger reactions than the adults do?
I mean, that's always potential because kids' immune systems are a little bit more robust. That's definitely something possible. But, based on historic data from vaccinations, they tend to be safe for children. It's just figuring out the dose that gives the right immune response. So for the most part, I'm not concerned. I've had the conversation with my kids who are range in age from 2 to 10. And my 3 older children have already asked, hey, when there's a study, can we do it? And I have no reservations about doing that based on the safety data already proven in adults.
Gotcha. Well, what do we think too about between now and then, between now and the fall, and when kids have their vaccines and we're all hopefully somewhat normal, what are the next couple of phases going to look like in your opinion? Nurse Burrell, what do you think?
Even just thinking about my kids. So I have a 2.5-year-old and an almost 5-year-old. And I've got to say that from their standpoint, that this world has got to look very odd to them. And so introducing even just a small sense of normalcy in which, yes, people are still wearing masks. Yes, we are still social distancing, but maybe that looks a little bit different where we have, a couple people in the front yard and, that's what's so small to us is so large to them. I think it'll help them, getting kids back into sports again, maybe even, pushing kids into school, without that fear of like, oh, I'm going to get COVID or, just really talking about it with your kids. This doesn't need to be something that we don't talk about. It's not the elephant in the room anymore. Even with like a 2.5-year-old, we talk about it. We talk about what we see and trying, unfortunately, to normalize the situation as much as possible. I think over the next few months, things will look a little bit more hopeful, even for a 5-year-old or a 2.5-year-old. And with this vaccine, we really just need to keep telling them that, the future is bright, that things will get better, and kids will cling to that. I am hopeful for that.
Yeah, me too. Just what's so funny is now, after almost a year of being in this sort of darker place, the little things are going to feel huge. Just being able to have one kid over for a play date, mass, will be amazing to our kids. So maybe it'll teach us to appreciate those little things a little bit more, that's for sure. Changing subjects a little bit, what do you know about I've heard a lot about how we can protect ourselves at home beyond the mask and the social distancing, et cetera, with any kind of cocktails and the cocktails of vitamins that people are talking about. I've heard a lot about vitamin D and zinc and things like that. Do you have any information on that? Is that effective, Dr. Kiss?
So there's mixed studies on this. We know the things that are recommended, which are vitamin C, zinc, vitamin D for the most part, right? Those are all natural immune boosters. And we know that they work in general for illness. We know when it's flu season, we tell people to take more of them. There have been studies about vitamin D and helping illness for years. Same with zinc, vitamin C. So we know that they help. Whether they're going to be the cure for you is not so likely. Whether they're going to prevent you completely from getting it, probably not. But they certainly won't hurt you, and there is a chance that it will help your immune system to work towards fighting it if you do come in contact with it.
Nurse Burrell, what do you think about that? Have you seen people come in and say, oh, but I did everything right? Or maybe you've noticed that people don't get it as severely if they exercise. Are there any of those sort of, I'm not going to say urban myths, but I'm going to say things that you've noticed that aren't necessarily scientifically proven about the people who are coming through the ICU?
I can't stress enough, I've seen it all. I've heard it all. I've pretty much heard of every cocktail, both of them, that we can possibly think of to try to fight COVID. And it is hit or miss. I see no consistency of people coming in saying, oh, I've taken the large doses of vitamin D, D3, vitamin C, zinc, etc., probiotics, you name it. I have heard it all. I mean, like Dr. Kiss said, I don't think that it's not going to hurt you. It could give you that possibility of maybe getting through it a bit easier, or, you know, maybe if the younger population takes it, that it might boost the immune system. But I mean, at the same expense, I'm also seeing 30-year-olds come into my ICU with no past medical history who have a long line of, you know, eating healthy and taking vitamins, who are on the ventilator for over 2 weeks. So, I mean, are those cases, you know, of the minority? Absolutely. But I mean that to say that I'm seeing it all, and there's not just one cure that is really working throughout all of the patients that I see at all.
Well, have you had anybody in particular that's passed through your doors, Nurse Burrell, at the ICU, or family members that their story sticks out to you for some reason? I mean, I know everyone is important, obviously, but I'm just wondering if there's one particular patient or two that have said something or shown you something that maybe you wouldn't have seen before.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few. There's one in particular, only because I feel like he did everything right, and he just wanted to provide for his kids. And so he continued to go to work. And I think that we have to remember that, you know, a large part of the population still has to go to work. They don't have the luxury of staying home. And this one patient in particular really did try to do everything right, wearing his mask anywhere he would go to protect his family. He comes from a multi-generational family, which is what we see. And unfortunately, he did get COVID. I'm not sure if it was from work or from family, et cetera. But before he was intubated, he says, you know, what more could I have done? And that stuck with me. And he said, he's like, I'm going to die, aren't I? And I'm like, no. So it's difficult. I have so many of these stories now logged in my brain, and they have truly changed who I am as a critical care nurse, in part for the better, because these patients are just important to me. They all are. I don't care who you are or where you've come from. I won't forget them. All of them, and their family members. I will never forget them.
What about you, Dr. Kiss? Do you have any stories like that?
Oh, I have tons of stories. The one that sticks out for me is probably early April, the first elderly patient who came into the office with confirmed COVID, and the fear in her eyes, and the fear in myself at that point, because I didn't have anything positive to say. I didn't have anything to treat her with. There was no option except to watch her symptoms. And we sent her home, and she was okay that day. And the next day, the son called to say, hey, she's not doing well. I'm taking her to the hospital. And she ended up in the ICU, spent a week there, and somehow survived it. And I will never forget the moment of her coming back into my office, and I cried. Because I was certain I was never going to see her again. And I can't explain how that story ended that way. And I had a 30 and change-year-old come in with no other problems who didn't survive. And I think the juxtaposition of those kinds of stories is what's been so hard for me, is because, as a doctor, I'm used to knowing, I know as much as I can about a disease process. If I don't know it, I know somebody to send them to who will be able to help them. But this disease isn't like that. And at this point, we don't know what we don't know. And it's a year in and we still have that. And so the juxtaposition of all of those stories coming together, I think, is what I will never forget.
It's been
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Impossible year. And I think the one strength and the shining light of the front, the healthcare workers like you, that is something I don't know if we can ever repay that debt. I don't know if we can ever, as a society, truly thank you enough for all that you've done, but just know that you're in all of our hearts and we really appreciate everything that you're doing. I can't even imagine what it's like to deal with that on a daily basis. It's got to be really tough. As we wrap up this show, I just wanted to ask each of you to share one piece of advice that you would give parents right now that they can take with them as they go forward into whatever this next phase might be. Nurse Burrell, do you have any good advice?
I want you to hold your kids tight and tell them that you love them, no matter what, and how crazy this world looks like right now. And it may seem chaotic. There's a lot of loss, but there's also a lot of light in this world that we can create. And I want you to hold your kids tight and tell them you love them and lead by example. And let them know that no matter how terrible this storm is, there will be a rainbow at the end of this.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Dr. Kiss, do you have any parting words for us?
So Fred Rogers famously said, look to the helpers, right? And we need to continue to do that. And in this time where it's, you feel like you've run the whole marathon, but the finish line is nowhere in front of you. It is coming. If you can just be a little bit patient for a little bit longer, but reach out to the helpers. Reach out. Tell us we can't help you navigate this if you don't ask us, and we don't know where you're struggling if you don't ask us. It is our job and our obligation to you to help navigate the mental health cost of this as well. If your family is struggling, please reach out to us. Please let somebody know. If your child is struggling, reach out to your schools. If they're not helpful, reach out to your pediatrician. Let somebody know so that we can get help, because this is long haul trauma for all of us, not just those of us on the front lines. And we need to treat it as such. And being positive is so important. But when that's not enough at the end of the day, seek help.
Thank you. Thank you both for joining us tonight. Dr. Jessica Kiss from Palos Verdes Medical Group, Lindsey Burrell, the critical care nurse from Little Company of Mary. Again, thank you so much for being a part of this important conversation. To all of you watching out there right now, I want to make sure that you are a part of our South Bay Mommies and Daddies Facebook group and follow on Instagram. And I really appreciate you joining us for this episode of Ask a South Bay Doctor. Take care of yourselves. Good night.